So how hard is it to get DNA in the right order? And this is one of the puzzles we have. Because the DNA is so complicated, it's not like you can just change one letter and suddenly you got, a frog turned into a mammal or something like that. So we got up to like 6 or 7. So here we are, 7. To get 10 heads in a row, 6,000 in a row is probably not possible in our lifetime, you might say, but maybe if you had. And humans have over 10 million ATCGs in the right order in 30,000 genes. So how did they all get in the right order? And the answer has been slowly, bit by bit. But if you ever had to roll dice and get the Yahtzee, 5 5s or 5 4s, it's the same odds if you roll the dice one at a time as it is if you roll them all at once. It's still the same odds. It would only be different if you rolled it and you could take the 1 4 out. So like when you play poker, if you get a couple of kings, you can keep those kings and then ask for more cards and then maybe get another one. But nature might work like that a little bit, but mainly it needs to have like all the right order to get something working right. So in flipping a coin, there are 2 choices, but DNA has 4 choices. And so it's like here's my dice, my DNA dice. So hopefully you can see this. If you've got me in there still. It's got 4 sides, ATCG, so I can flip it, and whatever it lands on, that's the number, that's the letter. So it's a 1 out of 4 chance. Or I could draw letters out of a bag, like with Scrabble, where you have a bunch of different letters. You can do the odds of that. So when you, it's a 1 out of 4 chance. And this, we don't know of any way. We think that this all got in order. I mean, as a scientist, we can't assume that there's some alien biologist or higher power putting it all in there. We're trying to look for physical explanations for how life got started. And so that's why we're looking at, we think it's random, and it's not like a creature could say, I really could use some wings, and they try really hard to mutate and form wings. The theory is that it happens all accidentally. So it's random, pure random chance, like flipping a coin. So random chance can produce complex rows of letters or complex head, tail, whatever, but it's not specific. If you need a specific order, that's not going to do it. And as far as a language, that doesn't say anything. You might be able to find one word in here somewhere, maybe not. I don't even see one word in here. Oh, here's one, by, B-Y. But by itself doesn't mean anything. You got to have it with a lot of other letters for it to mean something. Just like you have to have a lot of ATCGs for it to make a protein that means something, that can do something. Crystals, however, are specific, but it's just repeated over and over, like crystal, 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 or I. It's not complex. This could produce a snowflake, which looks organized, but it's very simple, really. But it could not produce a poem or a cell or anything that needed complex, specific information. So DNA is complex and specific, just like language. So the words on this page, it's very complex. There are lots of different letters, and it's very specific. And if it wasn't, it wouldn't mean anything. It would just be gobbledygook, as we say. So DNA uses triplet codes like words. A couple of words can't do anything. You can't, if you just give a person, well, you might say, get out of here, 4 words, give some meaning. But generally, you need more words in a long paragraph to design anything, to put together a machine, or to make the code to build a cell. We think we need lots and lots of DNA. So generally, genes are really like long strings of triplet code words, something like a sentence. So a gene is like a sentence, and they could do one thing, but as far as we know, most genes can't act alone. They need to be together with several other genes working together to make the cell. So the genes of a simple cell would fill pages of, if we wrote them all out, the ATCGs, it would fill a lot of pages. About, let's see, are they going to say? If you wrote out all the for a simple cell, it's going to be like, 5 or 6, 10 pages, something like that. A small booklet. If you write out all the ATCGs in our 20 to 30,000 genes at 100 ATCGs per line and 100 lines per page, they would fill 1,000 pages. So it'd be a pretty big book. I think the Bible's about 1,000 pages. So it'd be a book like that, full of ATCGs. That's what you need to make a human. To get a simple phrase like to be or not to be by random letters typing would be 1 out of over 10 to the 15th, or 1 out of a 1 with 15 zeros after it. Actually, with 26, it's 13 zeros. Yeah, sorry. No, what did I do here? Is that 15? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, that's the 15th. Oh, that's for ATCGs, I guess. No, I got to figure that one out. Anyhow, it's really hard to get a simple little phrase like to be or not to be, but yet I wrote that out real easy because I used intelligence. But without intelligence, by randomly, it's 1 out of, trillions if you're just typing randomly. If you need this specific thing, and a lot of times to get a certain working gene, you need it to be pretty specific. The theory of chemical evolution says chance mutations are the explanation. So it's sort of be like if there are a bunch of ATCGs are floating around in an ancient pond and started to connect together, what are the chances of getting an A first? It's 1 out of 4. Then what are the chances of getting the next one right? Well, if you have 2 letters could be made from the ATCGs. These are all the 2-letter combinations. So you have 16 combinations. And that's 1/4 times 1/4, by the way. But that's not enough to code for all our amino acids because there are 20 amino acids. So we actually use 3 ATCGs. And so that's 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4, which is the same as 1/4 cubed, which is the same as 1 over 4 to the 3, because the 1 times itself 3 times is 1. And so it's 1/64. So to get 4 in the right order, it's going to be another power. What power of 4 is 64? It's 3. 4 to the 3rd power is 4 times 4 times 4. That gives you 64. So this is the same pattern as the coins, where you multiply the odds. So a gene is the smallest section of DNA. Natural selection can choose good genes, but natural selection cannot create good genes. This is really important. Natural selection explains the survival of the fittest, but not the arrival. Where did the giraffe get its long neck and legs? Where did the bird get its wings? Natural selection cannot create wings. It cannot create necks. But if a neck appears or a wing appears, it can choose it if it helps the creature survive. Now, if a cow today were born with a long neck, it probably wouldn't survive well. So it's got to be coordinated with a lot of other stuff like longer legs. Small sections of DNA are useless. And so if they don't do anything, natural selection can't choose them. What are the odds of getting a small gene of, say, just 300 ATCGs in the right order to make a simple protein? Most genes are much longer than this. They go into the thousands. But it's 1/4 times itself 300 times, or 1 out of 4 to the 300th power, which is about 1 out of 10 to the 180th power. So this is worse than the, getting 100, flipping the coin 100 times. This is 10 to the 180th. Is this possible? What are the odds of getting a simple cell if you need 250 genes and each one has this odds? Now, maybe not all the DNA needs to be in the right order, maybe only 20%. So we're going to be real generous here. If only 20% of the ATCGs coding for the protein cytochrome C may need to be in the correct order for it to work, that's still 20% of this big number. 20% of 250 times 300 is about 1,500 ATCGs in the right order for a simple cell. The odds of getting that by chance is 1/4 to the 15,000th power. And if you change that to a power of 10, it's about 1/4 to the 9,000th power. So the odds of getting the DNA to make a simple cell might be 1 over 10 to the 9,000th power, or 1 over a number with 9,000 zeros after it. So how could that seems impossible, but maybe a lot of different orders could work. Like in human language, a number of different orders of 100 letters could make some sense. However, it's a small number compared to the orders that don't work. Doug Axe, PhD, says that maybe only 1 out of 10 to the 77th protein orders may be useful, especially if one protein needs to fit with another, like with muscles and the proteins that are in the cell membrane that let things go through. They have to be the right shape. Or flagellum need lots of proteins, like 40 different proteins working. Just like sentences have to go together to make a meaningful paragraph, or a new part of a car must fit the other parts. You just can't use any old shape. The first gene might be a little easier to get, but the next one needs to fit it. So a perfect feather gene will have no use in a tree. Probably not. So all 250 genes to make this simple cell need to be in the same place at the same time. You can't have 249 sitting around waiting for the 250th to appear, because we're already down to the minimum number of genes you need. They will start breaking down in seconds. So does it seem likely that a cell's genes could get in order by chance? It doesn't seem likely, but what if you had 15 billion years? To get 10 heads in a row with only 10 flips is hard, but if you have 10,000 flips, it's going to happen every time. So this is the fuzzy math for biology. They say, yeah, it's really seems impossible to get a cell to get the DNA by chance, but you've had lots of time and lots of atoms and lots of molecules bouncing around billions of times. And then they stop there. But you can actually calculate how many times every atom has hit another atom in all of time, which would be the total number of events in the whole universe in all time. You think, well, the universe is infinite. No, it's not infinite. It's got a set amount of stars, which means it has a set amount of planets and a set amount of atoms. And so you can calculate that. So we know the average size of a star, and we know how many atoms are in each gram of that star. So when you calculate that time the number of stars in the universe, which could be 10 to the 24th, you get about 10 to the 82nd atoms, which is a finite number, 10 to the 82. And then the number of collisions, the number of times an atom hits another atom, could be 100 billion times a second, but that's 10 to the 11th. So that's a lot. And then the number of seconds in 20 billion years is about 10 to the 17 seconds. So if you multiply the number of atoms times the number of collisions, because you have to collide to form a bond. And so you'd have to atoms have to collide, and then clumps of atoms like A's would have to collide with the phosphorus and make a nucleotide, and the nucleotides would have to collide to form little bits of DNA. So if you could calculate the total number of collisions of all the atoms in all time, you should get the maximum rolls of the dice, the maximum number of events. So all you have to do is multiply those three numbers. Where is it? Here it is. Number of atoms, 10 to the 82, times the number of vibrations per second, 10 to the 11th, times the number of seconds in 20 billion years, and you get about 10 to the 110th. So anything with odds greater than that number is probably impossible. It's like, it's like saying you got to roll 6 dice, but you only get, well, let's say that's not the best example. You don't even get some rolls, but you need to get like 1,000 sixes in a row, or 250 sixes in a row, but you only get a few rolls of the dice. Okay, these events include, I mean, it seems impossible because the odds 1 out of 10 to the 100th, that is less than getting one gene, which is 10 to the 180th. So it means the odds are against getting one gene in the right order, one gene. Or monkeys typing a sentence with only 100 letters. This includes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Professor, but can you go to number 8, please? Sorry.
It's just 1 out of 4 there.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, so we're saying like we've got like this dice and we've got to roll it and it's got to hit the right thing thousands of times in a row. And I'm just showing you that it seems like there's a lot of chances in the universe, but it's not much compared to what the odds are. And so this is what's puzzling scientists right now. And nobody's had an explanation for how life got started. And that's basically why this is one of the reasons why we don't, because we don't know how the DNA got in the right order. And we don't know how all those genes got in the right place and inside a cell and it started working. You have to have life started before you can have life evolve in that sense. So the total number of events in the universe is far too few to explain the information in even of one gene, never mind a whole first cell or a wing or an eye. 1% difference between a chimp and a human is still 10 million or 100,000, I'm sorry. 1% of the 10, it's still 100,000 ATCGs. So the odds are, you know, we're not even sure that way. It was really lucky to get a chimp to turn into a human, or was there something else going on that we have not discovered yet physically, or is there some kind of outside force guiding this? So all these things we've done so far are just assuming we could even form a DNA outside of a cell, but we don't know of any way to get large molecules outside of living cells. So how do you get a big protein? You know, so it's a chicken and the egg problem. You need 60 enzymes to make DNA because you need the 60 enzymes to put all the transfer RNAs with their right anticodons and the right amino acids to make the enzymes that then help DNA divide or help DNA transcribe itself. To make a protein, you need, you know, really a couple hundred genes working, or you don't even get a protein made. And if you don't have proteins, you can't then get cells to run. So it's like a chicken or egg thing. There's so many parts that need, even in a simple cell, there's so many parts that need to be put together. Even a ribosome has, you know, so many different messenger RNAs, RNAs, ribosomal RNAs and proteins in there have to be the right shape. And it's just, it's mind boggling. And hopefully you've seen that from our study of the cell, how amazing it is. So hopefully you're amazed that you're even alive, but also how could it happen just falling together accidentally? And I'm doing the odds here to say that the odds are against that happening. It would be like winning the lottery every day for over a year, or picking a particular atom out of the whole universe 80 times in a row. So if you won the lottery just 2 or 3 days in a row, you'd have the police at your door saying how you're cheating. But the odds are so against it, we can't figure out. So it seems mathematically impossible to get genes for a first cell by pure chance. Something else is going on. Now, there are little bits of RNA that can help copy things, but all they're doing is copying nonsense to make more nonsense. So it'd be like having a page of random letters and then say, hey, I made a photocopier, I can make more of those. Well, they don't do anything. So you still have to overcome these odds of getting a good, useful order. And natural selection, again, is not the answer because it can't choose anything until it does something. Natural selection cannot say, oh, you could really should put an A here or a T. It has to happen accidentally according to the theory of evolution. It only acts after the structure or useful molecule is produced. Natural selection can only choose reproducing things that already exist. They have to be reproducing too. So the first cell had to be able to get energy, survive, but also reproduce. Otherwise, it would have just died and gone out of existence and life wouldn't have got started. You had to have a reproducing cell to even get life going. Now, what can create information? What is needed to write a sentence or build a car? We know intelligence can do it. We don't know of anything else at this point. So even Francis Crick, who's non-religious, he did not believe chance could explain the first cell. He thought it had to come from outer space, but we've just eliminated outer space here by counting all the atoms in the whole universe. So you could say, and the atheist Dawkins, what's his name? He wrote a book called The Blind Watchmaker, or he also wrote DNA, the Selfish Gene. And he was saying, well, maybe little bits appear and then they get kept. And then finally you get a long piece. It can happen pretty quickly. The problem is little bits don't do anything, so natural selection can't choose them. So he made a philosophical or an error in his thinking to think that without cells, a reproducing cell, you can't choose useful things, you might say. So natural selection can only choose things that work, that do something useful. And Harold Blum then said, okay, so also Frederick Hoyle, he also said, well, maybe life comes from outer space, but where does it come from for there? So we don't even know that. What do we get here for time? Okay. And Harold Blum, biochemist at Princeton, he says you can't even get big molecules outside of a cell. You can only get 5 or 10 amino acids by random bouncing of amino acids together, but then they start to break down again. And you'd use up all if it was just like if 1/10 of amino acids formed by dipeptides, and then 1/10 of those formed tripeptides, you'd run out of atoms before you even got a short piece. So we know that large molecules can be made inside cells, but we don't know how they could have been made before cells exist. So we're left with two questions. How did DNA for a cell get in the right order? And how did it form at all before cells exist? So so I asked what your hypothesis is, and well, it's a fair hypothesis to say there must have been some intelligence involved, but where is that intelligence? If it's a biologist on another planet or in another galaxy, where did that intelligence come from? We've kind of eliminated it for our whole universe, but maybe there's other universes. So maybe an intelligence in another universe made life here, but that's kind of like the same as God. So, and we can't ever really scientifically, we can't prove that or disprove it, I guess. So it's frustrating for scientists because we're trying to stick to physical explanations, and maybe there isn't one for this. And so if anybody gets into the area of science and say, I'm going to discover how life started, people will usually advise them and say, maybe you should pick something else, because we've been trying for like 60 years and nobody's made much progress in that area. So anyhow, that is the DNA and chance problem. And I thought I would have to share it with you to know that we can't explain everything in life. So you could fill that in and turn that in. And again, people are going to say, well, what if there's a bazillion universes? Maybe we're the lucky one where life got going by chance. It's still hard to, first of all, where do you get a bazillion universes? So if you have to invent a bazillion imaginary universes, it's called multiverse. And we don't see any. And if there really are that many universes, are there really a whole bunch just like us, where there's a bunch of students sitting on Zoom somewhere in another universe with all our same names and we're all talking, but one student's different. And then another universe, it's all the same, but another student's different. It just, it doesn't make much sense. And also, if that really were the case, if we're that lucky, then you can't rule out any really unusual event, because maybe we're lucky in everything else. So you can't say, oh, that can't happen. The odds are against it. Anyhow, I don't think multiverse solves this problem. And then you have to ask, well, where did the multiverse come from? So you still got a problem of the origin of the universe. Like our present universe, it's running down. So it had to have something outside it started. I just saw a thing last night, a TED Talk, where he said originally there was nothing, just black, quiet, no time, no space, no nothing. Suddenly a universe popped out, you know. So it's like he kind of skipped over the idea, well, how in the world could that happen?